I am going to move us along into our next session here, which is Quality Assurance Project Plan, QAPP training. This is going to be presented by Cindy Fields. Planning for quality is important. The first step before the evaluation, collection, or use of environmental data or information. Join Cindy Fields, the EPA's new Region 10 Quality Assurance Manager, for training on developing QAPPs, including tools and resources and an overview of the QAPP submittal and approval process. Take it away, Cindy. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Cindy Fields, and I am the new Region 10 Quality Assurance Manager. I'm new to EPA. I'm new to presenting and engaging with the tribal audience. This is my first time presenting at a conference and my first time in Idaho. So what could go wrong? So thank you very much. So we're here to talk about quality assurance project plans. I give you a little bit of my background. I graduated from the Evergreen State College in 2001. My first job out of college was at an environmental laboratory running field samples. I spent 9 years at the laboratory, and then I went into consulting, where for the past 11 years, I've been a quality assurance manager, project chemist, lab coordinator, data validator on a multitude of projects all over the country. So I'm passionate about the environment. I'm passionate about quality. I'm really excited about being here, and I'm really excited about being at the EPA. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide you with an introduction to the quality assurance project planning process by answering a few questions: the what, why, when, and how of writing a quality assurance project plan. I'm going to include a little bit of information to include in a QAPP regarding your project. And then I want to save some time at the end if anybody has any questions. Next slide, please. So before you begin, feel free to contact the EPA Region QA team through your grant officer, tribal coordinator, project officer, or you can reach out to me directly. We're happy to help you kind of think through the process, answer any technical questions you might have. And even if you have developed QAPPs in the past, if you have a new style of QAPP that you're writing and you would just like a little bit of guidance at the beginning, please feel free to reach out to us. So why do you need a quality assurance project plan? Basically, EPA requires in its financial assistance regulations that all projects involving the collection, evaluation, or use of environmental information or data must have a QAPP. Also, a sound scientific approach is needed to support your environmental study and the decisions that you're going to be making based on those. And the QAPP documents the approach to that sound scientific development. Also, it's really important to make sure that your results are accurate, usable, and most of all defensible, so that the tribes can use the results of their studies in order to affect change. Even if you're not using EPA funds, if you're generating data that you may want EPA to use in the future for decision-making purposes, then everything needs to be documented in a QAPP before you begin the work. So what is a quality assurance project plan? In short, it is just a plan. It describes how you collect, evaluate, and use the environmental information that you're collecting. And it's the best planning tool to use to make sure that you are thinking through all of the before, during, and after points of your collection procedures. And one useful tip is to document as you go when you first start planning, start to write those things down so that you don't have to write a lengthy document at the end of the planning process. So what is environmental information? Environmental information can mean a lot of things. It can mean direct measurements if you're measuring temperature, turbidity, or dissolved oxygen in a stream. It could be analytical testing results where you are collecting samples and sending them out to a laboratory for analysis. It could be calculations, analyses, models to document how those calculations are going to run. Use of existing information, like from our previous presenter. If you are pulling information from different databases, a QAPP allows you to kind of think through where are your parameters in order to determine like what is valid data, what is data that you are going to be using. And then also, GPS coordinates if you're doing some watershed mapping, any sediment assessment or environmental technology use. These are all environmental information that would require a QAPP. And could you click twice? Thank you. So some more examples of environmental information are various studies, wildlife studies or invasive species studies. One more time, please. Thank you. Or different surveys like plant or ecological, photographic, or fish consumption surveys. And then two more times, please. And a couple of important things to note. If you do want to do some of these studies that are up at the top, the activities that you plan are controlled by your grant programs and work with your tribal coordinator or your grant officer to ensure that if there are any studies that you want to do, that they fall within the parameters of the grant that you are working under. And then two more times, please. And then the other thing to note is if you're planning a fish consumption survey, surveys of people may trigger some additional documentation, planning, and review for compliance with EPA's human subject research regulations. And I believe after this, we have a cultural presentation, and then I'm going to present another talk on the human subject research review process. So what else does a QAPP do? Gotta catch up. The QAPP documents the quality assurance and the quality control to ensure that the data you collect will meet the needs of your project. And so what is the difference between QA and QC? QA is an overall organizational system developed to assure quality within your organization. So for example, defining your organizational structure and who is going to fill that quality assurance manager role versus who is going to fulfill more of the project management or operations role. And if those people happen to be the same because your organization is very small, then it's just a matter of being able to document how you're going to keep those separate. And then quality control are the techniques and activities used to fulfill the quality requirements of your overall system. And these, for example, could be collecting field duplicates while you're in the field or collecting extra volume in the field to send to a laboratory in order for them to run their QC samples. So all of these components should be incorporated into your project quality assurance project plan to document, to ensure that the data you will collect will meet the needs of your project. So one important note is that the QAPP must be written and approved before you start collecting the data. I would say send to EPA no less than 45 days before you begin sampling to allow plenty of time for our QA team to review the document, provide any comments back, and then have that thoughtful, meaningful engagement back and forth in order to get you the document that you need. I'm not going to go through this slide in too much detail. I just want you to see that there is can be a lengthy approval process, depending on how many comments there are back from the QA team and how much modification you need to make to your QAPP. So there could be several levels of back and forth. And so that is why we do ask for that a bit of lead time, because we want to make sure that you can get out in the field when you need to be out in the field and that your QAPP is approved before you're out there. So some help writing QAPPs are available online. So we have what we call the EPA QAR5 document, which is the QAPP requirements. And then we have the QAG5 document, which are the guidelines. One more click, please. So there's a spoiler alert. These documents are in the process of being updated. These documents up here are about 20 years old. And so we've been going through a process to revise and update these. And the new Quality Assurance Project Plan Standard is in tribal consultation process right now. And that's open until July 21st. Next slide, please. So where else can you find help writing a QAPP? Region 10 does have a website dedicated to our tribal partners in Region 10. And it does provide some templates and some examples that you can use for your project. And it also has a link to the review checklist, which is what the QA team is going to be using to review the Quality Assurance Project Plan. And so you know exactly what folks are looking for as you're writing the document. Another good resource is the Participatory Science Handbook and Toolkit, formerly known as Citizen Science. There is a handbook and then two associated booklets. One is full of templates that have instructions, tables, and questions for you. And there's another examples that provide specific examples of quality assurance documentation. Next slide, please. What do you need to include in your QAPP? Basically, there are 24 required elements that are divided into 4 major subgroups. So project management defines the roles and responsibilities, the background of your project, your task description. Data generation and acquisition is how do you know what and how you're going to get to the answer that you're looking for in the end. Assessment and oversight. Are you going to use a criteria or an action level to compare your data against? You can document that in your QAPP. And then data validation and usability is basically what level of QA review is your data going to need? How are you going to evaluate that data? EPA uses a graded approach in which if some of these elements do not apply to your project, you can just put a statement in your QAPP that just says this is not applicable and you don't need to include it. Okay, next slide, please. So some QAPP writing tips. As I said, the level of detail in each QAPP will vary according to the type of work being performed and the intended use of the data. And although the QAPP is comprised of those 24 elements, not all those elements apply to every project. And so it is possible to skip over some sections if they're not applicable. Okay, that is all I have for you today, but I'm happy to take any questions you have, or if you just want to approach me, I'll be here through Friday and happy to talk about QA anytime. Thank you.
Question? Hey, Cindy, I'll ask you one. And I know you're kind of new at this, but can you give some examples of what kind of feedback we might have on QAPPs? What are the classic examples where we have those exchanged back to the grantees doing that work?
Sure. I think some of the comments, frequent comments that our reviewers see, one of them is a technical sampling program has been developed without the technical subject matter experts reviewing that. And so that's one thing for us to keep in mind on the EPA side when we do get a QAPP for approval. And we want to make sure that both of those reviews are happening and they can happen simultaneously as well. Another one is just making sure that if you have tables in your QAPP, if you are describing what is in those tables in the text as well, just making sure those two things match. And it's even easier just refer to the table and not repeat it in the text. And that way, if anything changes in the table, it's an easy update you can make and you don't have to go back and go through the text to find it. including field forms, you know, like your chain of custody or any sort of forms that you're collecting, you know, information in the field as an appendix is always a good one. I think those are the most common.
Thank you.
Sure. Oh.
Hello, I'm just wondering, when you do an environmental impact study, is this the same thing or is it different?
Adam, do you want to speak to the environmental impact study?
You mean like a NEPA review, environmental review? Let me see who else is in the room on this one. Okay, maybe Catherine can cover this as a general matter.
So I think if you're asking about the environmental impact statements, which are done for big major projects ahead of time, they certainly have quality assurance project plans for many different pieces of the work that they're doing. Is that what you're asking about, the environmental impact studies? So when you're using EPA funds to do any kind of study, we need you to have one of these quality assurance project plans, but all kinds of science, whether it's EPA funded or not, has these types of plans to make sure that you know what you're doing before you start, and the data that you're collecting is going to answer the questions you want it to answer.
I think I can expand on it. For the impact statements, environmental impact statements underneath, it's a major federal action. And so whoever the acting agency or player that's about to issue that permit, they're the ones who have to do those studies and collect that environmental data. And then they will have their own QAPP process because that's required for that environmental study. So I think that's what we were getting after. Did you have something else to add on, Michelle? Sure.
So as a longtime EPA project officer, I can say that the task of writing a QAPP can be daunting. It can be a lot to think about, and staff will kind of be like, "Oh no, I don't, you know, don't make me write this." And it's a good starting place to reach out to your community, to talk to nearby tribes, to see if anybody in your region has done a QA plan for what you're interested in studying. And that also gets you to something that's really useful, which is comparable data. So if you've got two tribes in kind of the same area who have both done salmon stream temperature studies that are looking at dissolved oxygen, stream temperature, you can start to talk to each other about what you learn. So the first step to writing a QA plan in my mind is not to start writing, but instead to pick up the phone and call a few people. And Zender Environmental also gives free technical assistance to help tribes develop their QA plans. So if you have this in your work plan for this year, then start with calling Zender because they do really a good job. They worked with Skagway to develop a QAPP for some very technical PFAS sampling down in their watershed. And I was astounded. So it's free technical assistance, Zender Environmental.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, this might be a different type comment question. Cindy, over here, there was a while ago, 2008, somewhere around there on American Falls Reservoir. on the Snake River and down where Bottoms is. That Snake River goes to the Columbia and goes to the ocean. But then the American Falls, they found about around over 25,000 waterfowl belly up. And they were laying there dead, and people were wondering, hey, what happened? How'd that happen? And we tried to find out, and nobody knew about this stuff, QAPP or whatever, or QA. So I don't know who could study it. To me, it feels like it should be an investigation of what happened and where's the point source and how did that happen? And people found out later on. They try to others try to cover things. I'm not sure I don't want to put anybody in a bad situation. Like IDQ, they don't work. They work with the state, and then they support the companies. Companies are in a driver's seat. We know that. And so there they go. The Superfund sites over here, they were elite dropping things into the Fort Neff River, and then the leaching and all that. And we're trying to figure out, you know, what's in there. There's 22 rail cars buried, toxic waste. How come nobody does that and goes studies them, find out what's going on? And then they put layers in these ponds and you know, these things, the phosphenes coming out, and then there's cattle's teeth fell out across the dairy farm where we went to that water wheel the other day. And then the teeth fell out in 1978. And there was a lot of children who were having sinus issues, and I think they might have paid them off, and then they told them, shh, I was going to give them hush hush money. But I don't know if that's true, but that would be something like this. To me, this looks like it's an investigation, find out what's going on, because this guy from Idaho State University went and studied it and said, hey, that's orthrophos causing that. But then these other guy says, oh, it's the fluctuation of the reservoir because there's not enough snow, and it caused the sea vegetation to grow underneath, and then they called it botulism. And they said that caused all the waterfowl to die. So this might be a different subject, but to me, it's connected because we're in a connecting area, or talking about sacred connection being or something. Thank you.
Just like. Yeah. The question was, how does this relate to the tribal exchange, which I don't know if Bruce is still in the room. It was the previous presentation from the Fish Commission. I don't know the answer, but I mean, if it is environmental data used to make regulatory statutory informations, that's federally funded. It would have to have those QAPPs as part of those assessments. So yeah, that's why we put these together.
And I will say that we do have the option if there's an immediate threat to the environment or to human health, or under police powers, we can go out and collect samples without having a QAPP in place and put the QAPP in place afterwards. We still need to do it, but if there's an immediate threat, we do have the ability to go out and sample. That's true. I do mean EPA.
By we mean EPA. One more.
Okay, I guess my question is, what you're presenting, QAPP, does that refer to receiving funding? A process before you receive funding? Is this a process before you receive funding for a project?
Adam, do you want to take that one?
So this process is if you got, for example, a GAP grant, and part of that GAP grant, you wanted to do a baseline water quality study, something like that. In order for that to be part of your project plan, this is the QA process you'd have to go through before those federal dollars can be spent to get that information. So that's the 1-2 of this. Does that make sense?
In response to that, then I would say that that's probably why you're not getting a lot of applications from tribes, is because it's daunting just thinking about it. And, you know, and you have to hire professional people in order to get these done. And if tribes don't have funds, then why would they apply for this if they don't have the funds to do all these studies and whatnot that you want? Is my question, I guess.
Actually, the short answer to that question was no, it's not funding afterwards. You can get the funding, build the QAPP with the funding, and then do the project. The QAPP just has to be developed before the actual samples have to be taken. So you can get a GAP grant right in the grant that you're going to be doing that project with those funds, and then develop that project. So that might be a little bit of confusion there. And her advice was to talk to the tribal coordinator, the project officer, as you write your grant, would probably be the best solution. Sorry about that.
That's perfect.
There's also lots of work that your program that could be doing that does not require data collection. So you may not need to have one of these plans. It depends on the work that you're trying to do. And you can also use the GAP grant funds to get training or to get outside help to develop one of these plans. So work with, if you work with your project officer or your tribal coordinator, we'll try to help you find out what you do actually need to support your project and where to get the help.
Anybody else before we close? Okay, thank you, Cindy.
All right, thank you, everyone.